We are keeping a close eye on what's happening right down the street from here with votes and talks on raising the debt ceiling. And here we are, one day closer to doomsday. In fact, 4 days, 6 hours, 58 minutes, and 35 seconds away. Now, we have reached a better place, a place where this bitter divide over party politics has come to a head. With the clock, look at it, it continues to tick down. So here's a question. Do desperate times call for desperate measures? Well, earlier I spoke to Peter Schiff. He's president of Euro-Pacific Capital. He also ran for Congress in 2010, and I asked him what he would be doing if he was in Washington right now calling the shots. Here's his response.
Well, I don't think we should raise the debt ceiling. It is a charade. For now, it's true. Default is up to us. If we want to default, obviously we can do it. But if we don't want to, there's plenty of revenue. At some point, that won't be the case. When interest rates rise, then we simply won't be able to make the payments. But for now, with interest rates as low as they are, it's still our choice. Eventually, it's not going to be. But for now, it is. But the real problem is not the debt ceiling. The problem is the debt. And raising the ceiling makes that problem bigger.
I mean, it seems to me like you're saying in some elements that deficit spending needs to be stopped dead in its tracks, period. But here's the deal.
Well, that's the only way to stop it. Remember, Congress has promised for years to reduce spending in the future, but it never happens. It's just like everybody has a friend that's constantly promising to go on a diet and lose weight, but it's always next week. You know, if you're serious about losing weight, you know, you don't with junk food.
Yeah, but you also don't starve the person. You don't starve the person and keep them away from food for several months. I mean, if that happens, I think if we stop deficit spending in its tracks, there could be some serious repercussions. People who rely on Social Security, on Medicare, on food stamps, they will be out of luck. It sounds to me very much, Peter, like this is survival of the fittest. So, you know, make the case for me that you're not saying that we're going to toss all the poor people, the hungry people, the disabled to fend for themselves.
Well, remember, one of the reasons that there's so many poor people and so many unemployed people is because of the government, because of all the resources the government is draining out of the private sector. So if the government actually stopped spending all this money, we'd have a stronger, more productive economy. And so we wouldn't have as many poor people, we wouldn't have as many unemployed people. But who's talking about starving? The government is still collecting over $2 trillion a year in taxes. That's plenty of money. You know, that's all the government was spending around 10 or 12 years ago. So who's talking about starving the government? I just think they're a glutton. I mean, they're totally, you know, way overweight. They need to come down and just eat a reasonable diet. And I think the tax revenues that they already collect is plenty. In fact, if we can cut enough out of the budget, maybe we can have some tax relief, because I think Americans are overtaxed. And putting this government deeper into debt, which means we're forcing even higher taxes on the American public in the future, that is not the way to solve these problems.
But the fact is, Peter, I mean, I think a lot of people would be offended at this statement that there's so much gluttony going on. Certainly not about the government. A lot of people would probably agree with you. But let's talk about who these entitlement programs actually affect, who that money trickles down to. These are people who maybe, you're right, maybe in the long term, and I don't think this is a totally invalid argument, that in the long term, if you have people stop relying on the government, maybe it will make them more apt to go out and do stuff, some people for themselves. But the fact is, this is also a right now problem as to what happens, you know, with these programs and with this money. If these people stop getting these checks in the mail, there could be some serious issues. I mean, in a way, this is shock therapy, a treatment that, you know, it doesn't kill you, but it's very painful. So,
well, maybe you can make the analogy to rehab. Yes, you know, if you stop taking drugs and go through withdrawal, there is some pain there, but there's a lot of reward as a result. The problem is, if you keep doing drugs because you don't want rehab, you end up dying of an overdose. And that's what's going to happen to the U.S. economy. Yes, it's unfortunate that a lot of people relied on promises from politicians that can't be kept. But the problem is, to try to sustain the lies, that's what's going to destroy the country. The first step is admitting that our politicians lied and overpromised, and let's deal with today's reality. The money is not there, and we can't keep borrowing it. We can't keep printing it. We need to deal with reality.
I think it's a valid point, Peter, seriously, but rehab is different than throwing these people to the streets with nobody to help them. And by the way, some people can't afford rehab and need help for it.
No, obviously, when the government is figuring out where to cut the spending, they don't need to throw anybody to the streets. You know, there are plenty of people who are collecting Social Security checks right now that are pretty rich, that are pretty well off. They use their Social Security money to pay the dues at their country clubs. They don't need that money. Yes, are there people that if you took away their Social Security, they would be out in the street? Yes. So let's not take it away from those people. But there are plenty of people who do not need that money. And the taxes are being taken from younger people who are struggling to get by, who are paying a lot more in Social Security payroll taxes than they are in income taxes. We don't want to raise taxes on them. If you've got wealthy people that have a decent net worth, they don't need that Social Security check.
But wouldn't you say, I mean, just at least to a small extent, that your argument is very Darwinian, it's very survival of the fittest, and the people at the bottom are really the ones who lose out and have less of a chance even than they have now of ever recovering from this?
People at the bottom are already losing out. Look at the cost of living. Look at the disparity now between the richest and the poorest. That's a result of these policies. That's a result of central planning and central banking that bleeds Main Street and feeds Wall Street. That has to come to an end, and it's not going to come to an end if we keep on running up these deficits. And all the employment opportunities that are being destroyed by big government, who does that hurt? Much. It hurts people, the poor, who are trying to work their way up the ladder, and the government has taken the ladder beyond their reach.
All right, certainly a different way of looking at it. In some ways, you can almost interpret what you just said as robbing from the rich, Wall Street, to help the others, but not totally. Peter Schiff, I want to thank you so much, as always, for being on, president of Euro-Pacific Capital in Westport, Connecticut.